Hey everybody, Mr. O here. We're going to do a video review for Chapter 2 Savings. One of the things that these reviews are designed to do is to help you figure out what to study. Sometimes we go home and we're studying for a test and we're not sure exactly what to focus on. This will give you hints as to what to focus on, what to kind of target, so that you're not wasting your time talking about something over there when you should be over here talking about or spending time thinking about something different. So that's the function. I would recommend that if you're watching this, you have notes out, you are taking some notes, asking questions if this is not the night before the test, and you can come in and kind of get stuff clarified. All right, so one of the main things that you're going to see on the test is going to be the foundations, and you need to know how many there are. You need to know what order they are in. You need to know a short description of them. And so, you may end up seeing a couple questions that are multiple choice talking about the foundations, but you also might get a question that says, what are the five foundations, and tell me a little bit about each one. So you need to know it well enough that you can recognize it in a multiple choice, but also well enough so that you can describe it. Another thing that we're going to end up talking about on the test quite a bit is going to be sinking funds. And there's going to be a couple different ways that a sinking fund is going to come up. First off, you need to know what it is. It's a strategy for saving money. And that's as complex as it is. It's really not a complicated term. And so if I want to buy an iPad and I don't have money to buy cash, to buy the iPad with cash, what I'll do is I'll come up with a strategy for maybe putting $20 away every single month until I have the total amount needed to buy the iPad, and then I pay cash. So the sinking fund is a strategy for saving money, but it's also a strategy for avoiding debt, right? And so that's why we want to do this, so that we won't take on debt. Now, that might kind of be how it would show up on a multiple choice, but I also might give you a scenario, something like you want to buy a $12,000 car 1 year from now, which would be 12 months. What should your sinking fund look like? And so basically you just do some math there and figure out that you would need, in this example, to save $1,000 per month into your envelope in order to have the sinking fund goal accomplished at 12 months. And so this is a pretty simple, easy example. The one I give you on the test will be similar, but not quite as easy. We didn't even have to do any real math on this. You might have to do just a little bit of math on the test. So we're avoiding debt, we are saving, that's kind of what the sinking fund is, but something that we've talked about several times is that in the United States, we have a negative savings rate. And what that means is that we spend more than we make. And you need to know that. It's not a good thing. There's lots of different countries around the world that have a positive savings rate. We don't. And that's why the focus and the discipline and all the other things that we will speak of in a few minutes is so important. These guys were really important, and they'll be kind of all over the tests. And they are Ben and Arthur. And so Ben and Arthur taught us a couple lessons. One of the first lessons that Ben and Arthur taught us is that starting early matters. And starting early matters because of compound interest, and that the compound interest doesn't have time to work unless it's in there for a while. And so you've got to start early, and if you don't start early, I've kind of given the example that I started, in my 30s, and I've lost out on hundreds of thousands of dollars because of not starting early. I'll never be able to get that back. So Ben and Arthur, starting early matters, but also they taught us that interest rate matters. I think if I remember correctly, Ben put in $16,000 total and ended up with over $1 million because of compound interest. But if Ben would have gotten 0% interest, that $16,000 would have stayed $16,000. And so starting early, he would have done that, but at an interest rate of 0, it wouldn't have mattered because he still would have only had $16,000. So both of these together are important, and that's kind of what they taught us. Now, this is something that we haven't spoken too much about, but it's something that comes up on the test, and this is time and the value of money. And so a couple things about this. Basically, This comes down to 2 points. One is inflation. And inflation is that things go up in price. The rise of the costs of goods and the rise of the costs of services. Things that were really cheap, or I give the example of bread. When your grandparents were young, how much was a loaf of bread? How much was a gallon of gas? And if you compare that to today's prices, of course, we pay way more. Well, same thing is true. When you're a grandparent, your grandchildren are going to be paying way more for those things too, and that's inflation. So when we're talking about time and the value of money, inflation tells us that we're not going to be able to buy as much later on with the same amount of money. So if I have $100 today, that $100 is not going to buy the same amount of stuff it will when you're a senior in high school. And 2, time is important when it comes to compound interest, because you don't get that time back. So basically, time value of money is money today has a different buying power than the same amount of money later on. That's kind of what you need to know. And the reasons for that is inflation, and I could be making more money. Next up, you'll see this not only on this test, but you'll also see this on the test that you take for the state. Reasons we save. And there's really 3 reasons we save. One of the first big ones is purchases. We want people to, or we want us to be able to buy things. We talked about iPad, we talked about clothes, we talked about all kinds of different things. That's one reason we save. Another reason we save, and maybe it should come as the first one because it's one of our first foundations, is an emergency fund. And this is for, of course, emergencies. It's not designed to make us a lot of money. It's not designed to buy us stuff. It's designed so that if there's a problem, we don't go into debt, and we have kind of a cushion if life happens, as Dave says. And the last one is build wealth. We want to grow our money. Build wealth shows in a lot of different ways. Build wealth, grow money, get rich. Doesn't really matter how you say it. The test might say it in a number of different ways, but those are the 3 reasons we save, because we want to buy stuff, we should have an emergency, and we want to grow our money. Now, when we talked earlier about a negative savings rate in the U.S., we realized that we don't really save. And so in order to save, a few things have to happen. One of the things is we have to have focus. You can't get distracted. You can't say, yeah, I'm going to do it, because in a month, if you just say, yeah, I'm kind of going to do it, I think I want to do it, the focus won't be there. And it's got to be there. It has to be a priority. It has to matter to you. And then there actually has to be the discipline to be able to continue to do it. And so let's talk about these. Focus and a priority, that kind of talks about the emotion that we've spoken of before. You actually have to get yourself worked up. You actually have to get yourself to care about this, because as the numbers show, Americans aren't natural savers. So there has to be some emotion built up to get the focus and the priority going. And for our discipline, you can do that a number of different ways. I'm going to put the word auto, because I've told you several different times that I just have my the place that I do my investing automatically take it out every single month. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to sign into the website. I don't have to tell them every month. It automatically does it. So if I'm teaching personal finance, yeah, investing might be really on my mind, and I might not forget it because it's really on my mind. But when it becomes summertime, maybe personal finance isn't on my mind as much. Maybe I'm thinking about other fun things that I'm doing, and I might forget to invest. Well, I don't forget when it's automatically taken out, and so that's important as well. Now, one thing I want to mention with anything, savings or investing, is this. Lots of people make this mistake. Oh, when I get my next job, or when I get my raise, or when I get a better job, that's when I can save. And income really has nothing to do with your savings rate. And that probably will show itself up on a test question, so let me repeat it. Income has nothing to do with their savings rate. Think about this. If we've got somebody who works at McDonald's and they make $20,000, which is not much, but they save 5,000 of that. They have 5,000 in savings. Okay, that's not hard to figure out. Let's talk about an NFL player who makes $1 million, just as an example, and saves zero because he's spending it on all kinds of things. We have the McDonald's person who had a better savings rate. So savings rate has nothing to do with how much money you make. It has to do with whether or not you're focused, make it a priority, and whether or not you actually do it. And so keep that in mind as well. Because this is a chapter on savings and it's not really a chapter on investing, there's tons of questions about the emergency fund. So you should know, and it kind of feels like, well, Mr. L, I know the emergency fund. For me, it's $500 set aside. Yes, and there might be a simple question as that, but there might be some other stuff a little bit more complicated. So let's talk about it for just a second. First off, location. The location of it matters. You don't put your emergency fund into the stock market. It's too risky. It's not designed to build wealth. So you put it into a separate account so that it's kind of marked emergencies. You know it's not getting mixed up with your iPad money, and it's not getting mixed up with your vacation money. It's separate. It's not in a risky place like the stock market because it's not designed to make money. You're not supposed to be making a lot of money. Now, having said that, if I can get 1% interest versus 0% interest, yeah, I'm going to take that. If my 1% interest bank is not risky and is guaranteed, and by the way, the government does, or there is insurance anyway, to cover money that's in a regular bank. So if it gets lost or the bank closes, you're protected. Well, if that protected bank's going to give me 1% and another protected bank's going to give me 0%, I will take the 1%. But stock markets aren't protected, and so I definitely don't want it in a risky location. It's for unexpected situations. It's for a feeling of security. Makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. There's a section later on that will talk about the difference between guys and girls. And guys are always kind of thinking, oh, the emergency fund's not that big a deal. I can do a bigger, better deal. I can make more money on that. And so a lot of men aren't that, excited about the emergency fund. And women tend to go, oh, if something bad happens, we're covered. If my car breaks down, we can still buy groceries and we can still do the stuff we need for the kids. That makes me feel good. So that security, especially for women, is a little bit more important. Know the order for your emergency fund. Do you invest first? No, because our foundations say, number one, $500. So you should know that. Why should you have an emergency fund at your age? You should be able to come up with something related to that. The basic idea is because emergencies can happen at any age. We talked about a phone that your parents bought you, or maybe that you saved up to buy, and something happens to it. It breaks, you drop it, it goes in the toilet. We've heard that story. And your parents are unwilling to buy you a new phone. Well, an emergency fund, you could think of this as an emergency as a middle schooler, might pay for that. You break a window. You lose a jacket. Your parents aren't going to pay for those things because it was your fault. Those types of things could be examples for emergency funds. I mentioned I think I mentioned contentment. I mentioned emotion, but emotion and contentment, we need to talk about both of those because they're both on the test. Emotion has to do with making it a priority, getting excited. Contentment has to do with the phrase that we talked about, keeping up with the Joneses. Okay? that's you see somebody else doing it, so you think you should too. An example I'll give, a newer example that I'll give, is that we have some friends who they go to Disney. They go to Disney World. Disney has a new resort in Hawaii, and they're members of that, and they can go every year because of their membership. And so my wife hears that, and she thinks, what? Hey, if they can go, how come we can't go? Maybe that's something we should do. And maybe it is. And if we created a sinking fund to save up and pay for that, that's great. Going into debt, probably not great, but that's what happens with keeping up with the Joneses. There's no plan. You don't have a sinking fund, and you go ahead and do it anyway. That's really what it comes down to with keeping up with the Joneses. So kind of know that. One thing that we talked about that we didn't all exactly agree with was the order of what you do with your money. This is what Dave says: give, pay yourself, and then pay your bills at the end. And we can argue all day about this one. If you want to give zero, it is personal finance. That's your choice. But these two, we're not going to argue about these. We need to agree with these. And this is why. Pay yourself really is the savings. It's really the investing and those types of things. It's not really necessarily talking about purchases and sinking funds and those types of things. It's really savings and investing. And our target is 15%. And so if we put 15% aside right before we do anything else with our money, then guess what? We're guaranteed to have 15% set aside. Too often what happens is people will pay their bills, and then they'll pay themselves at the very end. And what happens is, if we had $1,000 and there's only $30 left, guess what? $30 is all you save. $30 is all that goes into your retirement. And really, it should have been $150. So you shorted yourself $120 because you didn't make it a priority. You would never short yourself if this was up here was your order of priority. You're always going to have $150 in this example if we're making $1,000. That's why. So again, you can argue all you want about give, but don't mess up the pay yourself and the bills first. Now this doesn't mean, pay yourself $1,000 and leave zero for bills. That's not what we're talking about. We're just making sure that we have 15% always kind of going towards our investing and our savings. There's a term I saw on the test that I want you to know. You already know it, but the way it's worded was a little bit odd. Interest-bearing type of account would just be an account that gives interest. So if I have one account that gives 0% interest and one account that gives 1% interest, that 1% interest account is an interest-bearing account. And of course, we want to have some interest-bearing accounts if we can for our emergency fund. We're not trying to get rich, but it would be a good idea. And then the last thing. This is really about something we're going to talk about in a later chapter, but investing, because people take this class, they take this particular chapter, and they get excited and they want to invest. But the plan for you is really to pay cash for your car and to pay cash for college, so you don't have any debt. And then invest. But it makes sense if you think about it. It doesn't make any sense to have debt on this, and then be trying just to put money towards your investments. Put your own money as you're growing up and you're young. Cash for your car, cash for college, and then once that's done, once you're out of college and you have no debt, 100% of your money is free to you to do what you want. And then it's easy to come up with that 15%. It's harder to come up with that 15% if 40% of your money goes to debt, to your car loan and to your college loan. Then all of a sudden you go 40% to debt, 15% to investing, and I'm left with less than half my money. Well, if you don't have debt, 15% is pretty easy to come up with. So I think that will give you an idea of what to focus on. Those are kind of the main thoughts that I took away when I looked at the test. If you've got questions or comments, go ahead and reply, and either I or somebody from the class can help you out. Thanks for watching.